Hey y'all, welcome to our first Progress Texas happy hour, or it's just an hour maybe, of the New Year's in 2021. Sorry we're a bit late, but we just wanted to make sure that we had the best stuff to talk to you about today. So as I mentioned, it is 2021, and it's been quite a year already. Diana, Ed, Wesley, thanks for joining us to talk to our audience. Question. What did you think 2021 would be like compared to 2020? Dan, you wanna share?
Yeah, I mean, I knew we were still, the pandemic wouldn't be over. I know a lot of people were like, oh, great, 2020 is done. 2021 is, going to be completely different. I knew the realities of that, but I was trying to think of my, resolutions of things to improve on, personally and work on. I didn't know one of those resolutions was going to be recovering from an attempted coup. So that's a different add to the list.
Absolutely. What about you, Wesley?
Yeah, so this was definitely not how I expected our first week back to be like, but I was hopeful for the new year. I was especially hopeful going into the Senate races in Georgia. And I think I was right to be hopeful because we ended up winning those. So that's a bit of a positive. But again, like Diana said, reality also is still there. And so I knew that the pandemic was still going to be raging on. And, it's just as bad now as in the worst times that it was during all of this experience that we've been having. So that's still something that's very real and something that we're dealing with. And I didn't expect it to just automatically be an amazing year because it was a new number that doesn't really change much. So
I think actually yesterday we hit a record of 4,000, unfortunately passing because of the pandemic. You're absolutely right. And Ed, how about you?
I go back to our Monday morning editorial meeting where where one of the things I had suggested to the staff was that we ease into 2021 and, really kind of recover from 2020 and not overwhelm ourselves too early. And I was actually going over my notes from Wednesday morning where I made just jotted down a couple of things that I wanted to do that morning. And one of them was track the Trump rally in DC. It just seems so, like such an understatement compared to what happened and compared to what happened was what has happened with this year so far. Yeah. I saw someone post on Twitter that 2021 is already basically the hold my beer version of 2020.
You think that was bad? Wait till what we got in this season of America, 2021. But in all seriousness, this is what happened earlier this week was historic. And unfortunately, some of our own elected leaders, especially Senator Ted Cruz, contributed to what happened. And I think, we want to talk about to y'all, how Texas Republicans helped foment the insurrection that occurred earlier this week. Wesley, do you want to kick us off and talk a little about what you're feeling here?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different things that can be talked about here. One thing that I think is really important is to understand that this didn't just happen out of nowhere. This has been an event that was 4 years, more than 4 years, honestly, in the making. And it's because specifically Republican lawmakers in Congress, but also our state lawmakers here in Texas and the Texas GOP have refused to hold Trump accountable. So there's been a lot of disinformation and misinformation coming from our lawmakers, specifically around the most recent election and them claiming that Joe Biden, just false claims of voter fraud. And that all kind of culminated on Wednesday whenever lawmakers like Senator Ted Cruz and tons of GOP members of the House were refusing to certify the electors and had said before that they were not going to certify the electors for Joe Biden. And that disinformation doesn't just stop there. There have been conspiracy theories this entire presidency, and Trump has consistently lied to Americans about what is happening. He's refused to tell the truth. And the GOP, the Texas GOP here in our state has refused time and time again to hold him accountable. And we have, Alan West, who's the chairman of the Texas GOP, he is one of those conspiracy theorists. He's a Trumpist. He has refused to hold Trump accountable, and he's brought in people to the party who are these far right Republicans and white supremacists who take advantage of this moment to really inflict damage on our democracy. And so this is, like I said, this has all been a culmination that was years in the making. And it's because of people who have refused to hold Trump accountable. And even once Trump's gone and he's no longer in office, this doesn't just end. It's something that we have to continue to fight against.
Absolutely. Ed, what are your thoughts?
You know, I think back, it's like Wesley said, this is going back years. And, you know, you really look at what Ted Cruz did leading up to this, staging an election challenge that he knew would fail after 60 some odd lawsuits going through state and federal courts, rejecting all of these claims. And yet he still went and pushed it. And then the morning of when he started to do this and all hell broke loose at the Capitol and they had to evacuate the House and Senate, the vice president had to go to an undisclosed location. Fortunately, they were all able to come back in the evening, kind of miraculously that they were able to come back in the evening. And Ted Cruz still started to push the same thing, the same egregious claims that he was pushing that morning that incited the riot. He did it again. Ted Cruz is 100% culpable for the things that happened. Now, he's not the only one that is, but he himself bears responsibility for things that happened yesterday. And it's just outrageous. And unfortunately, it's the kind of political gamesmanship we've become accustomed to seeing from Ted Cruz. Yeah. And it's not surprising, but it doesn't make it any less infuriating.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about our staff's reaction to what happened earlier this week and how a lot of Texas Republicans, helped foment the insurrection. Diana, let's round it out with you. What are your thoughts on what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I know I felt incredibly shocked and surprised at what I was watching, yet at the same time, not feeling so shocked and surprised at what everything had erupted to become. I think a lot of folks had, thought like, oh, I would never think something like this would happen. How could this happen? There's just, no way. But the reality is that this didn't come out of nowhere. This, homophobia, racism, anti-immigrant rhetoric, just all out, just the most ignorant, wild things, a politician could say. Trump has been saying those things increasingly and getting away with them, not only for the past 4 years while he's been in office, but since the moment that he launched his campaign. And every time something happens and every time someone says, oh my God, I can't believe it, how could he say something like that? Or even maybe, stop surprising us anymore. I think back to the moment when he had announced his presidency and talked about Mexicans not sending their best or comparing Mexicans to rapists. That was the beginning of that political career launch. That should have been the end. And I think that is, I just keep playing that over and over in my head. And I just, this is what happens when that rhetoric, words matter and they have an impact. And this is what his words have led to.
Absolutely. And, for my part, I tend to go onto this website called Reddit a lot. And if you go to a
website called Reddit,
yeah, if you haven't heard of it, it's this thing called the internet. And on Reddit, I spend a lot of time going to like the conservative subreddits. And what surprised me the most is the way that the Capitol Police and security forces in general dealt with this event. It was not a surprise to me if you look at the kind of rhetoric that is going around like far right social media. And it really like painted this huge contrast with how, our protests like Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, no DAPL, how those are responded to by law enforcement in like vicious, brutal ways. Whereas these, whatever word you want to use for them, like how they were treated with like basically kitty gloves. And after the fact, this is what the messaging is from the right that, hey, this was not great. They're bad people on both sides. And, Ed, Wesley, Diana, yesterday we talked about, this is a new misinformation coming in after the riots. And how should we be talking about these things?
Oh, even before, let me mention one thing. Can we just give a gratuitous punch in the face to our illustrious Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who flew out there to speak at this rally and then blamed it on these fake protesters that were never there in the first place? I wouldn't expect anything less from Ken Paxton, to be honest with you.
No.
All right, sorry. I just wanted to add that because I know that wasn't part of where we're going into next. And I didn't want to get away, but
no, of course.
6 talking points that actually we put out yesterday. Wesley, you helped lead the charge on those messages. What was the one that stands out the most?
I can start at the beginning of the list just because I think that kind of played it in a way that I felt like made more sense when you go through the order of it. So just starting at the very top, one of the things that we thought was really important and that we think people need to practice when they're talking about this violence that occurred is that we need to call it what it is. So this was a domestic terrorist attack, and it was in the name of Donald Trump, and it was supported by Republicans who have been enabling him for years. And so it's really important that we call it like it is. We call it a domestic terrorist attack. These weren't protesters. They definitely were not peaceful protesters. And to call them anything than what they are is a disservice to our democracy. And it really just ignores the seriousness of what happened on Wednesday.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The last time I felt this glued to a television set was September 11th. It just gripped me because this is not supposed to happen.
Yeah, I was definitely, I don't know about y'all, but I was watching with fear for the lawmakers and the congressional staffers and really just anyone who was in the Capitol, but also just anger because like we've talked about already, this was something that we should have seen coming and we should have been prepared for, and there was no reason that we shouldn't have been prepared. And so I think that, again, we need to treat it like it is serious because it was.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. I have a friend who works in the Capitol building for a House representative, and I immediately texted her like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And she said she was working from home, but I just felt so much fear for her, and to see images of our representatives. I saw an image of Veronica Escobar, crowding behind a wall, hiding. It made me so angry that they were. Scared and helpless, and that this was just happening, in front of our eyes. And I mentioned earlier, this has been 5 years of, Trump stoking fears and misinformation and his base. But it's also really important to know, like you had mentioned, Wesley, earlier, it wasn't just him, it was a lot of the GOP. And if it wasn't only folks that were outspoken in supporting him, including Ted Cruz, including a lot of our own Texas Republicans, but it was also a lot of those representatives who stayed silent, who didn't speak against any of what he said. They have just as much of a culpability in what happened yesterday. So what happened yesterday wasn't just one person, it was one person and a whole group of people lifting that up and enabling for it to happen.
Absolutely. And they need to be held accountable in some way, shape, or form. Sorry, Ed, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead.
The thing which shocked me the most, and which I think shocked a lot of us and the people who are watching, is the whitewashing of what happened, trying to compare it to the police brutality protests earlier in the summer. Ed, I don't think it has to be said, but do you want to explain why those two things are not the same?
Yeah, so, first of all, this is the first attack on the U.S. Capitol since 1812, and it was an armed attack. Let's not kid ourselves. This is nothing like a street protest from the summer of 2020. And when you look at the fact that what people were protesting over, the people who had an armed attack on the U.S. Capitol sat in the chair of the president of the Senate, went into the Speaker of the House's main office, sat at her desk with guns at their side because they didn't like the outcome of the election, a democratically conducted election versus Black Lives Matter protesters in the street protesting over police violence and police killings of their community. Completely different, not the same at all. And the people at the Capitol, let's face it, it wasn't a protest. It was a conspiracy-fueled element of sore loserism, let's call it, but people who just wanted to have an insurrection, and the Capitol Police let them do it. And because we had this president who did not want to activate the National Guard, he said that he immediately activated the National Guard. He did not. That was a lie. It was a lie in his statement that came out because he's trying to coddle these people. There is nothing comparable to what happened yesterday. And for all those people who try to say that there were like Antifa Human Resources was out there putting people into the crowds, look, get real. We all saw the pictures. We all saw the photos. We know who was leading it. We saw all the Trump MAGA flags. I recognize that it may not be all Republicans, and that's fine. But for all those Republican voters, this was done in your name, and it should make you furious, rightfully so. And that's why Trump and all these other people are unlike anything we've ever seen. And we simply cannot compare that to street protests of the summer.
Yeah, you know, one of the funny things I saw is this woman who had been pepper sprayed. She said to the camera, "This is not supposed to happen to us. This is supposed to happen to the Black Lives Matter people." And it's like, what is going on? Like, you know, Wesley, you know, we all talked about the disinformation and how it like is changing people's minds. Like that was such a clear exhibition of that.
Well, and one other thing I also want to point out is that's just a huge, like that's an example of white privilege and white supremacy, and the fact that this woman thought that she was going to be able to go to the United States Capitol and try to break into the building and thought that she would be able to do it with impunity. There would be no repercussion because she's a white woman, and this is only supposed to happen to Black people in our country. Like,
right.
What does that tell you about the state of this nation when this woman thought that she would not have to face consequences for her illegal actions and for trying to attempt a coup? That is serious. I mean, that's just crazy to me.
If you haven't seen the TikTok of that woman spliced into the theme song from Animaniacs, it's actually hilarious. We'll put it in the comments.
It's really funny. Yeah.
So a lot of our viewers right now, they're saying, you know, the House and Senate need to do what they can to like hold people accountable. Even after inciting this insurrection, President Trump or Donald Trump is still the commander in chief, and he has access to information and tools that are beyond the scope of anything that like we can even comprehend. What should be happening to prevent him from doing something even worse than what he already did? Diana?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, have this false sense of security of, oh, you know, Biden has won, we're just going to wait it out. But I think there are a lot of other folks that were a bit nervous, hoping that nothing would happen in between that time. And literally one of the worst things we could imagine happened this week and just, you know, stopped our clocks. And a lot of folks have been talking about, you know, in the Capitol invoking the 25th Amendment. And if that doesn't happen by, you know, the folks in charge, and it looks like a lot of the folks in charge have already started to quit, you know, and be cowards because they're scared of taking part in that possibly. But if that doesn't happen, you know, there are a lot of representatives in the House that have stated if the 25th Amendment, you know, isn't pulled out, there are articles of impeachment that have been drafted and that this needs to happen because there's so much sensitive information that Trump still has control over, a lot of things he can do. And we just need to, you know, it's already past due to get him out and to stop this from happening. You know, I can't even imagine how much worse it could get.
So a lot of our viewers don't spend all their time studying politics. For those who might not know, Ed, do you want to explain what the 25th Amendment is and how it would be used in this context?
So the 25th Amendment is where the cabinet and the vice president basically get together and tell the president, you're not going to be the president anymore. And it's really pertinent right now because the president is not of sound mind. And because we know after 5 years that this president constantly escalates. That is his method of operation. is to escalate the next time, time and again. And you cannot believe a thing he says. So look at the fact that he is a compulsive liar and that he constantly escalates, and then pair that with the fact that he is the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces for 13 more days. That is a very dangerous combination. And if the 25th Amendment is not invoked, the Congress should absolutely invoke articles of impeachment to remove him from office immediately.
Yeah.
One thing that I'll quickly add, Satvik, is because I completely agree with all of this and the national security implications. But I also think, like, we need to think about the implications for what this means for future presidents. Just because Trump only has a couple of weeks left in office does not mean he should not be held accountable for the crimes he committed against our country. He has violated our Constitution. He's gone against his oath of office, and he needs to be held accountable. It doesn't matter how much time is left in his presidency. Otherwise, we're basically telling the world and we're telling future presidents that they can get away with anything. You know, if Trump can get away with this, what in the future would we actually hold a president accountable for?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I kind of mentioned it before, but like during the George Floyd protests, I remember a friend of mine who's a teacher had a student who came to one of the protests here in Austin, and he was shot with a beanbag, and really messed up his face. He was in the hospital. It was in the news. The complete contrast to what happened this week. I don't have the words for it, but does one of you want to talk about what this inequity really means? Ed, Diana, Wesley, Diana.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes no sense, but then it does make sense. I think that there are a lot of folks out there that are like, what is white privilege? How could I possibly explain it in a lesson to maybe students or something? Yeah. Wow. January 6, 2021, just those images of people sitting in those chairs, how they got there. And the fact that this was planned way in advance. A lot of folks that were at that protest had merchandise that said January 6th, Trump rally at the Capitol.
Yep.
Like you said, on Reddit, folks had talked about this date. This was well publicized. Everyone knew about it. There were Republican speakers at the rally before this happened, including Ted Cruz and other folks from Texas. And so there was no excuse, really. There should have been more preparation. They should have known it was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen, and somehow folks just, waltzed in. I kept laughing and thinking about whenever I would hear the anchors or the reporters say, so have any police gotten there yet? No. Any sort of, type of restraint? No. Have they gotten there yet? Like every 20 minutes, I would hear an anchor ask if the police had gotten there yet, or if there was any National Guard or anything like that. And I just thought, this is such a wild, opposite of the Black Lives Matter protest, where days in advance they were announcing National Guard will be here. Folks were in full, bodysuit, the military suits. Folks who were in the police, local police stations had, all this suits worn and just ready, and were part of the violence that was incited. It was a completely different picture, and it was just wild how different it was. And I think we all know, that it's because these protesters look different and they have a different kind of privilege.
Yeah, and I think seeing these rioters scale the walls of the Capitol, first of all, proves that walls don't work. And second of all, it shows, look, if any of us were out there protesting, we would have never made it past the steps. And that's not an assumption, that is a fact, because we've seen it time and time again. And the way that they were treated yesterday, holding their hands, bringing them down the steps, taking selfies with the insurgents, giving directions as to where to find certain offices inside of the Capitol. This was reported this morning that the cops were giving directions as to where to find certain offices. This is outrageous. Picture yourself in another country watching this and thinking, well, if a bunch of rioters can take over the U.S. Capitol, imagine what a foreign adversary might be able to accomplish with some real planning and some real military assets. That's the kind of thing that we have to look at here, is not only the fact that people were able to get away with this, but the breach in our security, the complete and utter incompetence in the executive branch to protect our capital from what are essentially a bunch of people out there in hockey pads. Give me a break.
And, when you look at the people who were in the Capitol, it wasn't, not that it would have been like better if it was only just the normal Congress people and the normal senators, but like Mike Pence was in there, Kamala Harris was in there, Nancy Pelosi were in there. These are the people that are in the line of succession to take over if we have a president who's not able to exercise his duties of office. These were all people who were in the Capitol and who were in danger. And on your point of the security breach, these people were able to get into congressional offices. They were on people's laptops. They were going through mail. There's no telling what kind of secrets or what kind of technological breaches were committed while they were in there. So it's not just a physical security concern. It's also a concern about their access to information that could be vital to our national security as well. And then just very quickly, because I know this is where we started with this question, but on the issue of inequality and inequity in the police, we have two systems of justice in this country. And I think what we saw on Wednesday made it very clear that depending on the color of your skin, it determines which system you get, you're forced to interact with. So for people like Breonna Taylor, who were asleep in their own home, and police came into her house and shot her, versus police who walk violent insurrectionists out of the U.S. Capitol after they stormed into the building without any scratch on them, unscathed. This is not, people are living in two separate countries in this country. You don't get the same experience with justice depending on the color of your skin.
So last point I want to talk about. We covered how what happened this week was the culmination of events over the course of years. Is it all over now that they left the Capitol? Are we like back to normal? America is good to go? Is that the case?
Yeah, it's done. We're fine. We're good now. Everything's going to be okay. And everybody back to your stations. No, obviously, one of the things we started talking about in this conversation was that Leslie and the rest of the team helped put together 6 messages on what happened on Wednesday and how to talk about it. And you can find that on the homepage of Progress Texas right now. Actually, you can put that in the comments as well. But one of the last comments on messages on that document is that it's taken us a long time to get to where we are right now. And it will take us a long time to get to where we need to be. But for all those people who say this is not America, the message you should take from that is that this is America right now. This is where we are. This is who we are. And if you don't like it, I don't like it, I know the rest of us here don't either, we can do something about it. And getting involved and staying involved and talking to each other and trying to find common ground and not dialing into conspiracy theories or promoting those things, all of that is important to the health of our democracy. And look, democracy is like a muscle. You have to exercise it to keep it healthy, but you also have to do it the right way. So it took us a long time to get here. It's going to take us a long time to get out of here, but we got to be able to do it together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So I just dropped the 6 messages in the chat for Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Take a look at it, share it with your friends. It's really important that we understand how to talk about what happened and not let people like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump capture the narrative and make these false equivalencies that really damage the fabric of society even more than they already have. Any last words before I send this off, Ed, Dan, or Wesley?
Stay safe, y'all. There is still a pandemic. Please wear your mask. Please stay home if you can. Please do not travel if you don't need to. There are so many things happening in our country right now, and there are lots of reasons to be wary and potentially be fearful. But the fact of the matter is, on a positive note, we won the U.S. Senate this week, and I know there's hope in the future. So this is not. I know that this conversation that we had today, while serious and while it needed to be serious, can be a little bit depressing too, to think about where we're at, but there are good things on the horizon. So just know that good things are coming.
I totally agree that good things are coming. And if there are a lot of folks that feel, really hopeless right now in these difficult times, we've been through a lot of difficult times with the pandemic, with this attempted coup. Never thought that sentence would come out of my mouth, but okay. We've been through a lot of trauma, and something we need to do is silence is violence. We can't stay quiet. And in order to heal, we need to keep this conversation going, with our friends, with our family. A lot of these conversations have to be uncomfortable. And in these spaces, we can have growth and we can have real healing. And again, you can go to that article, the 6 ways that you can talk to folks about this. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, there's a question for you from the comments. I think I might have the answer, but I'll let you answer. Are there going to be any Humans Against Ted Cruz t-shirts?
So for those of you who are new to Progress Texas launched a campaign in 2017, 4 years ago, called Humans Against Ted Cruz. It used to be a project we had called Cruz Watch, where we said, we watch him so you don't have to. And it eventually evolved into Humans Against Ted Cruz, which had merchandise. Who knew that it would be an evergreen campaign? It was really just for the 2018 election, but it keeps coming back. If you want a Humans Against Ted Cruz sticker or button, go to our website. We have a store, and you can get those things right away from the Progress Texas store. As for the shirts, we actually have a few in storage. Maybe we'll bring some out in the next week or two.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a cool competition on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter for y'all to be a part of. If you want the stickers or the buttons, I dropped the link in the chat, so everyone could do something to cheer them up after what happened. So definitely get that ticket for the loved one or progressive, or even if you have a Trump supporter in your family, it might be a good dig at them to like something that sticker. Wesley, thanks. Diana, thanks for adding that little positivity. Ed, the 3 of you are amazing. I'm always so glad to be on the team with you, to hear your insights and learn about what's going on. To those of you, this was a longer than usual segment, but I think it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that we got to share what we've been thinking about with y'all today for the first time in the new year. It was a little bit heavier. So Ed, I think, mentioned the Animaniacs TikTok about the women who thought that people like her shouldn't be pepper sprayed by the police because they're the good people. Sometimes all we can do is laugh at absurdity when some actual funny things aren't happening. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. Take a look. And we will see you next week. Thanks for being here. We can't do this without you. You're all amazing. Have a good one.
Bye, y'all.